Hello everyone, Luke here, and today we're talking about Breath of the Wild. Yeah, my cousin Duke is going to be doing it. It's Luke and Duke. They call us the dynamic duo. What am I talking about? Yeah, Breath of the Wild, so the video's going to be good. Enjoy.
Specifically, the Great Plateau. Now, the Great Plateau is like a really great place. I really like it. You know, it's homey, it's beautiful, and I mean, look at that landscape. It's wonderful. It's just I mean, very small. It's a quaint little place with no one around, and an empty temple. Basically, in this video, I'm just going to be talking about what the Great Plateau is. Like, what was its purpose? How did it come to be? And, like, why is it man made? Why is it a man made plateau? I mean, it seems like this was once just a little place where people came, um, and it was normal. Like, it wasn't risen up, but it feels like it's held together, held up by man made structures, which is the ones I'm standing on right now. So basically, I realized that I began poking around, and I was kind of surprised by the results because there was like a lot of evidence supporting what I'm basically going to tell you in this video. Duke, of course, I sound the same as my cousin Luke. Um, Here at Clicks TV, we work together. We don't make very much money. Don't become a YouTuber. It doesn't pay very well unless you're Van Oz or something. Okay, anyway, so as you can see right here, it kind of looks like the entrance to some sort of castle. I mean, obviously it isn't, it's a plateau, but there definitely looks like there's a door here that's been filled up with dirt over time and not and non-use. Um, that seems to be the case, but it really does look like some sort of a grand entrance. So I was like, okay, that's sort of weird. It's kind of strange. So I tried to, investigate a little more. And basically, what I found was very surprising. And, it'll take me a little while to get there, but basically, just look at the plateau. I mean, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful little thing, especially with the, twilight sunset going on. So it's beautiful. I really love the plateau. But, just look at that composition. You got a pathway running up here. It's the temple, and then the peak, forest area. It's just great. But what I want to talk about is basically everything surrounding the temple. And essentially the temple of time. I'm just going to avoid these guys here. Um, Basically, the temple of time is a place of worship for the goddess Hylia. And what I do want to say, it's not the same one from Ocarina of Time. It may look similar, but it was probably rebuilt multiple times because it has been over 10,000 years. And they probably rebuilt it looking the same just to honor the original one. So basically, we can see a pathway coming up here. And essentially, what I thought was, okay, there's a little pond here. I mean, look at that. It's just a little tiny pond that happens to be right where this little road is. And what I think is that this doorway into somewhere inside the Great Plateau was originally a road that went straight into it, except over time, as people didn't go, people, the road just disappeared, and of course the doorway is filled with dirt. And it just split into a fork and went right and left of the Great Plateau. After all, the old man said 100 years ago with the calamity, whatever, people started to not come, and it fell into ruin. So that's obviously what happened. Why would the old man lie to us? Like, I don't know. Wow, bad jokes. Okay. So basically what I was looking at, so I began to dig a little bit deeper, okay? And I'm struggling to get up here. Okay. So I began to dig a little bit deeper, and basically what I found was that another doorway right in between where the other one was, there was, another doorway. And we can basically see this. So there's like the top of another like rivet into the stone or whatever. And then we can see the arch of a large doorway. Of course, is filled with sand. And that's basically it, because Link can't go underwater in this game. We can't actually explore what's down there. Obviously, there are no treasure chests down there, or we would have seen them. So we can't really get down there and explore, but that's basically all we can see. Now, let's advance this theory a little bit more with this. And that right there is a tablet that basically says that years past there were frequently huge rains that flooded basically everything, and it was a danger to the Hylians. And so they built up all of the river, and they built up all of the water into reservoir lakes and things like that. Now, let's go back to the Great Plateau. Let's look at that little area again. So, it's raining right now, which is kind of basically what I'm saying. But with those Lanayru rains in mind, told by the Zora, let's look at this. Now, what we see here is a very low part of the Great Plateau. Anyone who knows anything about Breath of the Wild map knows that lighter things are higher up and darker things are lower. So this is one of the lower parts of the Great Plateau as opposed to this, which is actually getting pretty high. So here is the lowest part, and water always trickles down to the lowest part it can. And this is a really low part. So basically what I'm thinking is that one of these giant floods from the Lanayru region fell on the Great Plateau, and maybe made this pond, a few of these ponds around here, and a few of these ponds, and of course this one right here. So we can see that there's a doorway, and as I've explained before, why would there be a doorway if no one could go in it? Because it was flooded. Because naturally it was not flooded when it was built. The Lanayru rain came after the second calamity. So that's why this is flooded. And we can see, if we dig even deeper, we can also see that there were giant stone structures here. I mean, when you look at it for the first time, it's not that jarring. But, like, if you look at it for a while, it's like, why are these weird stone structures here? It just doesn't make sense. Now, going up this pathway, we can see guardians were there. And I'm just going to run past these guys here. We can see that guardians were here. There was a little area. And I can just imagine all of the happy Hylians coming up these stairs from that little doorway, going from outside of the Great Plateau, which is right here, going to inside, and there's probably a little staircase going up underground. And then they would make their way up these steps until they've reached these areas. They could have talked here, and essentially what I think is going on, I could be wrong, but there would be little like sermon or little service areas here, and then of course up here where you get your first Hylian pants, and then they would go up here and there would be another little sermon area right there, go up these steps, and eventually they would be at the grand entrance of the Temple of Time. So they could basically just be there and be here and be happy all together. And I can just imagine all of the chairs being here, and what even looks like small tables that are wooden and cracked over 100 years of not being in use. And of course, there's the goddess Hylia. People would come up and pray and maybe speak at a little podium here or something. And then we can see these ponds here, which are probably remnants of the Nehru flood. So, I mean, they even left pots behind and a bow in the chest over there, and it's just really nice. And they did leave a ladder where you could go up and be places. And I'm not going to go up there right now, but that's the Temple of Time. People actually came up from under the Great Plateau and then to the Temple of Time for worship. So basically, the only reason that little door exists is to let people come in and worship their goddess, Hylia. Now, something interesting, that brings us to the question of why is the Great Plateau lifted up in the first place? And that doesn't really make any sense. Like, wouldn't it just be easier, instead of manually lifting up an entire piece of land that's miles across and then build a temple on it, wouldn't it just be easier to just build a temple? And while I don't know the exact reason, my guess is that the plateau was built to make sure that the goddess Hylia was being respected. They wanted the Temple of Time and the areas around it to be elevated so that they could be closer to the heavens, just by a little bit, by respecting the goddess Hylia and making its own little worship area, which is the Great Plateau. So in reality, the Great Plateau exists to worship a goddess, and that's something that I don't think anyone really saw. But there is more evidence. But first, before we do that, I would like to say something, and that's that the Great Plateau is not the first time that this exact piece of land here has been lifted up and put down. Because if you remember, at the beginning of the game with the old man, somewhere around here, the old man says, not only did the temple decay, I already said that in this video, but the old man also said that this was the birthplace of the Kingdom of Hyrule. So think back, when did the Kingdom of Hyrule really get founded? And personally, in my opinion, it's the end of Skyward Sword when Skyloft lands and is back at the ground. That's really the birthplace of the Kingdom of Hyrule, because after that, it wasn't very far until a castle was built. And that's really what this is about. So this piece of land here, all that you see, has already had a history of being lifted up, and that's something really interesting. But before I get into more of the theory, I would like to basically debunk another theory that has been circulating that I want to get rid of because it's not correct. And that theory is the theory that this area here, the fountain here, is actually Castle Town, the remnants of Castle Town. That doesn't make any sense. First of all, this stone is, the gray stone is how most Hylian structures are built, like this one right here. Do you see that? Those are the structures that are about 100 years old. The structures that are like more yellow, like the Forgotten Temple, so basically you can see here, I mean, it's a temple, and I don't want to get bombarded by things like that. That's not fun. But okay, alright, I can't believe that's not good. Alright, well, I'm just gonna warp out of here. Yeah. But that's essentially the temple of the Forgotten Temple. I think it's another Sheikah worship center. And also it might have been a dungeon, like a forgotten dungeon. I would like to add that the Lanayru waters are probably the other reason why the Sage Temple ruins are engulfed in the Regencia River, because the Lanayru rains not only created ponds and things like that. That's probably the reason why there's so many freaking ponds in the game. It's ridiculous. But the Sage Temple ruins are probably engulfed into a small wetlands, because of the ponds. Because of the Lanayru rain. And since the Lanayru wetlands are so close to Zora's domain, these rains could have even created the Lanayru wetlands altogether. So that's just something a little bit, a tidbit of information to think about. So with Castle Town, I mean, that's obviously not the remnants of Castle Town, because if it was, then there would have to be little tiny ruins all around here, and they wouldn't be the original Castle Town ruins. They would have to be much older. They must have been rebuilt many times, because the ones from Ocarina of Time are probably long gone, because that was over 10,000 years ago. And also, this fountain here is the fountain used in many, many, many ruins. It's a common fountain, and they probably wouldn't have used that in such a place as Castle Town. And that means, because the Temple of Time is here, and anyone who's played Ocarina of Time knows that the castle must have been somewhere around there. And that's just improbable, because, I mean, look at that. Could a castle really be around here? I think not. But anyway, continuing with my theory, I just want to debunk that real quick. Continuing with my theory, so let's look at the Eastern Abbey. Now, the definition of an abbey is basically like a monastery where monks or religious priests live and work. So basically that's what an abbey is. So essentially, I mean, the only monks in Zelda, or at least this one, are the Sheikah monks. So the Shika monks must have literally lived in these very halls and worked as well. And there's a shrine in basically the middle of them, which, that could have been some sort of a worship as well. So, you can definitely tell the theme of the Great Plateau is worship when you just dig a little bit. But there was probably a special chamber just for the shrine. And these other chambers were for other things, just like living quarters or whatever. And there could have been a little stand here or some sort of a stone table. The possibilities are limitless once you actually start looking at what the ruins are and could have been. So basically, we can see another pathway here. So the doorway, obviously, by the way, these types of doorways are Shika doorways. I've just found that out, and there is a little bit of evidence for that later in this video. So the Shika, look. The Shika built an abbey for their monks in the Great Plateau so that they would be really, really close to the Temple of Time, which of course is the main place of worship. Now, there are a few other temples here, like the Sage Temple, of course, and the Forgotten Temple. Now, back to here, look at this. This is just... Once you start looking, it really makes sense. The pathway, now there's a legitimate bridge here that probably bridged over some other pathway. And then the path continues, most likely, to the Temple of Time. And there's a little place of sermon right here. And they have a little bit of a flat area you can go around. Go into the sermon area. Go down. I'm just going to take a shortcut here. And you could go up here. Gonna take another shortcut. And by the way, all the guardians around here got up here and destroyed most of it. I'll show you that in a quick second. There are 2 guardians pointed at this wall, so my guess is that they probably destroyed it instead of it just falling into ruin. Walls don't fall down into ruin. Tables may break over time. Grass may grow. Glass will get chipped and break. But whole walls and holes in the ceiling doesn't quite happen over 100 years. Even in harsh conditions, my opinion is that these guardians here were the culprits in destroying the Temple of Time. Which is actually very symbolic because they were destroying the thing that Calamity Ganon hates, which is, of course, Zelda and the goddess. So, and they even bought a little worship center at the top. So, basically, that's my theory. And, it's good. And, I think Clicks TV is making some pretty good theories, if I do say so myself. So essentially, I'm just going to get this guy right here. Didn't even get him. Wow. Okay, that was bad. My theory basically ends here, but I do just want to show one more thing. And that is, I forgot where it was. Is it here? Yes, it is here. This is probably the Western Abbey. It was much smaller and in the forest. This is the Eastern Abbey. Why would you say something is Eastern without there is some sort of other abbey in a different place? Or else it would just be called Abbey. So in my opinion, these are the remains of the... Well, Link is kind of like kneeling down there. It's kind of strange. This is probably the Western Abbey. And you can see right here that there is a Sheikah symbol right there on that crest. I can look right there. There's a Sheikah symbol right there. And although this is the only piece of, abbey that we have left, there was most likely some, and there are probably other pathways around here and high-tailed lizards, and the old man came here and set up this. But that's really what I'm trying to get at, is the Great Plateau in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is about worship, and it was built to worship the goddess Hylia. And I look up on the internet and I see that there really aren't very many videos explaining the Great Plateau. I mean, hasn't anybody else thought that it's strange that the Great Plateau is held up by man-made structures and it's not a natural plateau? Hasn't anybody ever thought that? Apparently not. I couldn't get those squirrels in my Hyrule Compendium, but that's what I'm trying to say. The Great Plateau is a place of worship. And another piece of evidence, if you want it, Mount Hylia. The mountain on it is named after the goddess that the plateau was built to worship. And I just think that this is, really, really interesting stuff, and it answers every single question about the Great Plateau. And I actually would like to add a little thing. It's like one of those Easter eggs, verbal Easter eggs. So basically, when you start a new game, you come out of the Shrine of Resurrection. Then your first objective point, the yellow dot, is to go over here to the east. And after you get out of the Great Plateau, in the real game, your first objective point is Kakariko Village in the east. And then you are told by the old man to go do 4 shrines. And then, but when you get out of Kakariko Village, you're told by Impa to go do 4 divine beasts, each at the corners of the map. And these are each, and the shrines are each at the corners of the Great Plateau. And then you're told by the old man to come to where those lines intersect. So when you finish a Divine Beast dungeon, there is a line that points to the center where those lines intersect. So it's basically, the Great Plateau is basically a short version of the entire game, and I think that's a cool little Easter egg that most people probably haven't noticed. But it's pretty fun, and the only difference is basically everything's on a smaller scale, and you don't fight anyone at the end. So, thank you very much for watching Clicks TV, and like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.